We're not trying to get this horrible stain of sin off of us.
Right. Okay.
What we're trying to do is get the conditioning that the world has put on us off of our mirror so that we can actually be a good reflection of reality.
Hello, Agnostics. This is Cass Midgley. I'm the co-host of Everyone's Agnostic podcast. That opening comment was a pull quote from our guest this week, Wayne Donahue. I suspected for decades while I was a Christian that Christianity was a machine that produced the opposite of Jesus. I would say anti-Christ, but I'm not talking about 666 or a person or the apocalypse, but anti-Jesus. I don't consider Jesus to be Christ any more than you and I are. Anyway, perhaps some of our listeners can understand how crazy that was for me, how confusing that was for decades, to be a part of an organization that claimed one thing and produced the opposite. I believe that Christianity is a poison we've been drinking for 2,000 years, expecting to get well. Well, the tests are in, and the evidence shows that Christianity on the whole has made the world a worse place. I think we as a people are going to have to get pragmatic about our beliefs, that we bear no allegiance to any sacred text, but only to one another and creating a better life and future. Let's establish up front that there was something legitimate about Jesus that drew us to him. Beyond that, we were born in the West. It got to us while we were young and impressionable. Many of us, well into our adult years, continued to buy into the Christian message. That was not because we were stupid or credulous or naive. There is some good shit in there. That said, I'm convinced that modern Christianity, the one that emphasizes estrangement from God as its core problem that needs to be solved, is one of the most powerful, far-reaching machines for anti-Jesus values in the world. My antidote is, although there are a lot of teachings of Jesus that are contradictory, without apology, I'm going to appeal to those teachings that make sense to our common sense, to what we as humans can establish as virtue. Many Christians at this point ask me, well, on what basis? On what basis do you espouse to know right from wrong? I won't waste any time addressing how insulting that is, that without God or the Bible, we as a species would not know right from wrong. That's absurd. Bases are fictional. I understand the metaphorical need to establish, like a map, a base that all other places can be measured against. To know where one is, it has to be in reference to a stationary point. That's what is meant when they say their beliefs are grounded in Scripture. In order for Christianity to stop poisoning society and culture, it's going to have to get better at choosing which of its teachings have borne bad fruit and which have borne good fruit. It seems that people are afraid to think for themselves. They'd rather be told by the basis what to think. This need to feel that one is grounded or anchored is a strong feeling. I'm afraid it's just never going to be that simple. Nothing about life is that static, especially in the realm of philosophical and theological unprovables. If there is no basis, no external basis, we must look within, which is not the simple, easy solution people are looking for, but it's where the masters found their path, as evidenced by their lives. Our guest today exemplifies this navigational prowess. I met Wayne Donahue on Facebook several years ago. We had many mutual friends in the Christian music business. Wayne was one of the founders of Star Song Records. Some of their biggest artists were Petra, Whiteheart, Twyla Paris. After parting with Star Song and his wife within months of each other, Wayne set out on a pilgrimage. And let's get to his story.
Hey, Wayne, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
I'm the co-host, sidekick.
All right. Now, where are you guys actually located?
We're in Murfreesboro.
Of course.
I mean, what can I say? I'm in Houston. You know, I mean, we're Southern boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Where were you raised?
In Houston. I moved here when I was 6, so yeah, you know,
Wow.
I'm a Houston native.
But you spent some time here in Nashville, right?
Oh yeah, I you know, we had an office and a recording studio there, and actually, you know, the company moved there from Houston right after I left, so I spent tons of time in Nashville and tons of time in L.A. Of course, we did a lot of stuff in Nashville, too, so I was back and forth between the three cities a lot.
Were you a producer, record producer? What did you do?
I was chairman and president of Star Song. I did a lot of co-production and production, but I was more involved in the building of the company, you know. Mm-hmm. But I was a semi-musician, you know, is what got me there in the first place. So, sure. You know, quite a number. Put out like 120 albums over a 13-year period.
Wow.
Yeah, I worked for Star Song. I was at one point. I asked you over on Facebook if you were there at the same time I was, and we weren't there at the same time. But
no, I started the company in my garage apartment, and it got up to the point to where, you know, right after I left, EMI bought it, and you know, we had a pretty serious catalog at that point.
Sure,
but. I got divorced from my wife and the company in one 4-month period in 1986. So.
Okay.
Holy cow. Gee, talk about throwing you for a loop there. That's tough.
Well, yeah, I thought it was the end of my world, and it was really the most awesome thing that could possibly have happened to me.
Okay.
You know, I mean, I in my view, and I think in any objective view, I'm a jillion times better off than if I'd have stayed with either one of those things. You know?
Right.
Those things.
Sometimes, actually, often things have to get worse before they get better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've become a Taoist in my evolution, and you know, one of the fundamental principles is that you cannot judge a situation in the present moment. You know, that something that looks horrible is going to turn out to be fantastic, and something that looks fantastic can just be. It speaks of how everything has the shadow of the other thing within it, you know.
Oh, the yin and the yang, sort of, huh?
You know, that's the ultimate Taoist symbol, you know, is the yin and the yang. And, of course, the thing that really, the first thing that just tipped me off that I was going to really like it was the first verse says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao.
Right.
Right.
When you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha.
Yeah, and so this whole long history of exploring names and worshiping names and entities kind of falls away when you start studying the Tao, even though my house is still full of Buddhas.
Yeah.
Are you, so you were Christian prior to falling into the Taoist?
Very much. Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much. You know, I came back to the Lord when I was 21.
So were you raised Christian by your parents? Like what
my parents were fundamentalist, you know, Bible believing Christians.
Yeah.
But the very best version of that, you know, really good, sweet, open, got real involved with me when I got involved with the Jesus movement, and you know, we had a meeting that met in our house, and they moved all the furniture out of the living room every Tuesday night, and
wow.
You know, they were really exemplars of good Christian people.
Okay.
Were they into the civil rights movement at the time and stuff?
They were always very. My dad, you know, would go street preaching with black preachers when in the 50s. You know, so yeah.
You say you came back at 21, so you kind of had a little rebellious stage. Came back to the Lord at 21.
Right.
And then what?
Well, I played in a Christian music band for. Let's see. I started a band called Hope of Glory, and we traveled all over the place, and we're pretty successful. And then, when I was 24, I got married and started a little distribution company distributing Maranatha recordings. Mm-hmm. Then, within a year or so, I had started the label. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you're a lot of, you know, in my journey, as I went from Christianity to away from Christianity, a lot of my Christian friends fell away. It seems like on your Facebook profile, as bold and as blatant as you are, they're sticking around. Is that your experience for the most part?
Yeah, you know, I do get the personal Facebook messages that tell people that, you know, their whole church is praying for me.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I've had a couple of guys just rip into me hardcore.
Yeah.
And but by and large, you know, I still get the love from those folks.
Yeah.
I don't know why, because you can see how I am. You know, I mean, I do everything I can to just state a different point of view. But, by and large, people have been super nice to me, that I've come back across. And, this is after a 30-year absence. So,
Wayne, what kind of, when you say they really rip into you, what do these people say? They're very disappointed in you, I suppose. I hear that a lot.
Well, I had one guy that was really, a part of my thing from the very beginning, and he took everything that I said as being anti-Christian, and it offended him so badly that he kept calling me a coward and telling me that, that if I wouldn't publicly debate him on the truth of Christianity, then I was just an intellectual coward. And he got so wrapped up in this idea that I should have some sort of debate, when, of course, I don't think, I think these things are impossible to actually debate.
Sure.
And I said, I don't have anything to debate. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm not trying to sell you anything.
You're trying to convert him.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to defend a point of view, really, even. I'm just like, this is where I'm coming from. This is where I've come to. Take it or leave it. I'm certainly not being evangelistic.
I wonder sometimes, Wayne. I mean, we see in the public, and especially the political, some of the people that are the most adamant anti-homosexuals out there condemning and lobbying against. They end up being homosexual. I don't. The parallel I'm drawing is that when there's somebody that just wants to take you on, like, come on, and put up your dukes and fight. It's almost like there's an internal battle going on in that guy,
right?
And he wants you to play the role of his alter ego and
or something. Yeah.
Something, I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely.
I will allow anybody to say anything on my Facebook page. I've got 2,000 Facebook friends, and they're from all kinds of crazy places. My MO is to put up something provocative, let them go after it, and they write pages of comments. But this is the only guy in my entire Facebook history that I've ever had to defriend because he just would not stop calling me names.
Mostly what we interview is people on their spiritual journey, and typically away from their childhood religion or whatever. But I'm curious about those catalytic moments. What were the things? What happened, or what came into view that changed your worldview? Okay,
well, when I left Star Song and my wife, or they left me, I guess would be more appropriate. I thought my life was at an end, of course, and I was 36 years old, and I was back home in my home bedroom.
Well, was it almost like Steve Jobs? You got fired from the company that you founded?
Right. I decided that one thing I was going to do, I got a little job teaching at the Art Institute of Houston, teaching music business. I decided that one thing I was going to do was give myself a real education in world religion, And I just, I'm a huge reader. And so, I went to the library 2 or 3 times a week and had huge stacks of books and would just read. And I gave myself a mandate that said, if it's a religion of any significance whatsoever, I'm going to know the tenets of it and its fundamental practices. And if the practices aren't too bizarre, I'm going to practice, I'm going to try practices. Whatever their shtick is, I'm going to try it out.
Sure.
At the same time as I was teaching, and I started smoking weed again, and I had all these young people in my life because I was, teaching at the Art Institute. And I made a lot of good young friends that I'm still friends with back, 18, 20 years ago. And so at that point, I read and studied, and I came across Rumi. And Rumi kind of broke me open to the emotional experience of just being in the presence, kind of. I tell people, Rumi broke me open again, kind of in a fresh way, and I just loved him.
When you say again, as in what was the first time? Christianity?
Well, when I came back from California when I was 21, after being out there and going through a lot of crazy, came back to the Lord in my parents' bedroom and started this whole new thing of, I started the Christian band and, kind of all of that. I was a quintessential, Jesus movement guy.
Right.
And so, at that point, I was a evangelical, charismatic, all of that. And just, my whole life was that.
Yeah, that's the purpose. You had purpose.
Right. And then when, after the separation, I was just a hedonist student for 5 or 6 years.
Right.
And then I kind of settled down into some practices that I started doing yoga. I went from, there was kind of a sequential thing there. I went from Rumi, who just kind of broke my heart open and got me back in touch with some sort of emotional version of spirituality. I really got enamored of Ganesh and the whole Hindu mythology, and I read, the Bhagavad Gita, and the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali to me is like the ultimate book of yoga and Hindu theology, essentially. So I really got into the Yoga Sutras. Did a lot of Buddhist practice, a lot of meditation, a lot of stuff like that, and it really, that stuff works. I just became a better human through all that. And so it was Rumi, Ganesh, and then the Tao. When I got to the Taoist stuff, I was like, this is the most stripped down version of how I think it works that I've ever seen. Mm-hmm. There's 81 little chapters. They're enigmatic. You can look at them forever and still get stuff out of them. And there's no doctrinal right.
Right.
There's philosophical right, but there's no overhang of doctrine and practices that you must do, and there's no thing to actually join or anything like that. But so I started a Taoist study group that meets at my house, and it's been going on now for like 7 or 8 years. And I've had some what I call the real Taoist, an Asian couple that both are like PhD research scientists for Exxon, but that are totally into the Tao and all the religious side of it. So I got the hands laid on me by the master and got the transmission of the Tao and all that stuff.
Wow.
Does that bring back any memories of Pentecostal being laid hands on? Or
it's very religious. I love the experience, and I tell people, it was subtle but profound. I really did feel like I got something out of it. But at the same time, they're religious. It's they do full moon ceremonies every full moon, and they're the sweetest people in the world. And it's a worldwide network. They don't build temples. They build these holy rooms in their houses.
Wow.
That saves a lot of money.
Well, it does. They're all like engineers, and they're people mostly from Taiwan that have come to this country and become successful. And I've been to 4 or 5 what they call the holy houses. So they take their whole house and dedicate it, and then they take a room and set it aside. And if you just went to their house, you would never know these rooms existed. They keep them closed off except for events.
Yeah.
Say, Wayne, when you go to these places, what happens in those rooms? Is there a ceremony that you
yes.
Go to?
The ceremony that they have itinerant masters that go around and perform these ceremonies and teach. I really got into the Jungian side of, Jung he was really into the study of the Tao and the I-Ching. Mm-hmm. So, from my side, it was much more intellectual and individual practices that you could pick up from the texts. Their thing is big altars, and that there's no specific God name or anything, but they're kind of offering things to heaven. And what happens is that their position is that in the past, this transmission ceremony was only available to like 1 out of 1,000 students, and they're saying that this is a new age and it's open to everyone, and that they have of course they they have a cosmological clock that basically says that, we're in the end age and all that. But, I'm not all that interested in that aspect of it,
Yeah.
But it's been thrilling, too, to be accepted by these people and brought into their little thing. And it's not cult-like in the sense that they have a leader. It's very distributed, it seems like.
It even forgive me, I don't know enough about the Tao, but I do know a little bit about it. And it sounds like there's a lot of pagan kind of, like when you're doing full moon ceremonies and stuff like that. One of the fundamentals of the Tao
is that you're studying the patterns of nature and learning that everything is cyclical and trying to identify things according to where they are in their cycle.
Oh.
There's several Taoist, sayings that have to do with gardening and nature and stuff like that. We were talking about it the other day at the meeting, and I said, well, one thing, about the Tao is it's always about gardening. And,
that's pretty good, though. Seeing things grow, nurturing, those kind of things, watering.
It's always about, the idea that you can't make the grass grow by pulling on it.
Yes. Okay.
There's a notion that most things you should just leave alone and let them grow, and not interfere with the cycle of nature.
Wow.
And if you interfere at the wrong time in the cycle of nature, you're going to just get mowed over because nature is stronger than you are.
Yeah.
There are many books that parallel the Tao with Christianity and just like there are with Buddhism. There's a lot of attempts to kind of normalize Christianity's relationship with these other ideas. It can't really be, I don't think, not from where I came from in Christianity. That can never be harmonized completely with a Buddhist way of thought or a Taoist way of thought.
Well, not with the pressure of salvation and all of that. No.
I was going to say, why is that? Is that the reason? Salvation, substitutionary atonement, all that stuff?
Well, I think that the reason is because Christianity is essentially binary.
Right.
Everything is drawn in terms of good and evil and the heroic journey.
Isn't that ironic? Because I felt like that the way the garden, and I read something this week that somebody wrote, and they said the serpent was right. In that, because what the serpent said was, if you eat this, you will be like God. You will know, you will have the knowledge of good and evil, and you will not die. And of course, they didn't die. And there's, in many ways, they did lose the innocence of not knowing their nakedness, etc. And they came into this knowledge. They did then enter into this binary mindset of good and evil, and they see everything through the lens of judgment, which is the opposite of the Tao, right?
Right, exactly. And so, and I think that essentially, the Abrahamic religions, number one, they each say in their own way, it's our way or the highway.
Right, the exclusionary.
And number two, the entire practice is reaching out to something outside of yourself. Yeah. Whereas the entire practice of all of the meditative religions, the essential practice is cleaning your insides.
Right, right.
Something happened that was just an explosion, let's say. You left Star Song, your wife left, and there is an explosion. And if you think about the metaphor of an explosion, your ears are shot for a second. Right. You can't hear anything except maybe a high whistle, and you're maybe even concussioned, and you might even go. You might have to go to the hospital and be in a coma for a while. And so I feel like in our lives, when there's this giant traumatic event, there is this season where we are down. I mean, we're in ICU for a while, and then as we come out of the coma, as we come out of the fog, as our ears start to work again, then we do have to find, especially if we're used to things that gave our life meaning, and now those are meaningless or gone. Right. We do have to find those things. We have to find, our place in the sun. We have to find our journey, get back on a path. And so I'm just saying this out loud because it sounds to me like those 4 or 5 years where you kind of just became what you called a pot-smoking student or whatever, there's this floundering. There's this time of floundering.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so then you found your path. And that's really what the show's about, is like talking to people about what worked for you and helping others relate to, like, I'm on that same journey and I'm still floundering. Give me something to hang on to.
It seems like, Wayne, when you go inside, that's when things start changing. And we in the West, we go outside all the time. We're always outer directed, and this is inner directed.
And there's also a diametrically opposed notion of what's inside.
Explain. What do you mean?
We're not trying to get this horrible stain of sin off
Right.
of us.
Right.
What we're trying to do is get the conditioning that the world has put on us off of our mirror so that we can actually be a good reflection of reality, and once you begin to polish the mirror and get rid of conditioning as much as you can, and you see reality, then you're able to move in reality with much more confidence because you're actually not as influenced by all the emotional components of reality that have been conditioned by your response to your upbringing or environment or whatever. And so the notion is that your interior, kind of your primordial self is already good and sees actual reality. Mm-hmm. And if you can get your shit clean enough, you can see reality and interact with it in a way to not hurt yourself,
Well, and isn't that one of the most damaging things that the human race ever heard was, as you are, innately, inherently, instinctively, you are evil, you are bad, you deserve eternal torture.
It's just the opposite of what all of these meditative paths teach.
Right.
It's not the same thing. People say, "Oh, it's not the same thing."
Right.
Especially if you have any intellectual power at all, you just can't accept that it's the same thing or that it has the same result. And another thing.
Okay, you're addressing this sentiment that some people say, "Oh, all religions say the same thing."
Right.
Yeah, and that's just not true.
No.
It's just essentially untrue.
Yeah.
Along this way, I also went back and approached the psychedelics with a fresh view towards what I was trying to use them for. Mm-hmm. And I went back and did acid. I went back and mushrooms, and those things were invaluable. When my kids were teenagers, we tripped together. Mm-hmm.
You got 3 sons, right?
I have 3 sons, the 2 older ones who I'm speaking of at this point. I have a son that's 14. We haven't tripped. All that led up to for me, and I was just thinking about this yesterday. At one point in 1998, I did mushrooms by myself in a little tiny 1-room apartment, and all of my studies, everything that I had done up to that point, kind of coalesced in this one trip. And, I don't know whether you've studied much about I don't know, are you familiar with Terence McKenna?
Nope.
No.
Okay, well, Terence McKenna is like a psychonaut who is a big intellectual proponent of the fact that the ancient Vedic idea of soma, which was a substance that's referred to in Hindu literature, were actually psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of iconography and stuff that says that that's probably true, and it certainly sounds like, from what they're describing, what you experience on mushrooms. And so
what did you experience?
Well, I'll tell you. The reason I referred to McKenna is because he talks about what he calls helpers. I think he calls them, but I saw the helpers. and I was standing in a, I can't remember what they call it. It's a zeotrope, which is a cylinder.
Oh, a zoetrope. Yes, I know what you mean.
And you're inside it, and it has little slits around it.
Right.
And it moves, and that creates motion. All right. It was like I was in the middle of a zeotrope, and there were Buddhas sitting in every slit, and the thing was turning, and the Buddhas were flashing, and I saw that first. And then I moved beyond that into a place, and the best way I can describe it is that there were these little guys that were made out of light rope.
Light rope.
You can go to a lighting shop and buy.
Yeah, for Christmas lights or something.
Okay, I see.
They're like Christmas lights, except it's a rope.
Right.
Right, okay.
So these guys looked like they were made out of light rope. They were little light guys, and they were little guys. And there was a big gate, and they were standing on both sides, and they were just motioning me in.
Come on in. Wow.
And I went in the gate, and it was like a city of light rope.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I was changed forever.
Sure.
And for weeks after that, I felt like I had light bulbs inside of me.
Oh, wow.
It was like incredibly profound, and I was doing nothing to make this happen.
But it was because of the mind-altering sort of mushrooms that you ate.
They were certainly the catalyst.
Yeah, that kind of opened the door.
And so, I don't want to leave that out, because to me that's
significant.
But what it did, I had been steeped so heavily in these subjects and in these practices. I was meditating, and I was surrounding myself with Buddhas all the time, and I was, for years, I wore a bindi every day, I told people that it kept away the people I didn't want to talk to and drew in the people I did.
So a bindi, is that one of like a robe?
No, it's like a sticker on your forehead.
Yeah, okay.
I just became a total freak into this stuff. And in fact, I would throw parties called bindi parties, and you would come to my house, and I would have a bowl of bindis, and I would say, put on a bindi and take off your shoes. And then, we would have, 30 people doing X together, or it was I had these two very, very beautiful teenage sons. So it was me and my friends and them and their friends, and it was it was amazing. We had turntables and lights in our house. We didn't even have a TV. So we had that house in like 1997 to 2000, basically.
I'm trying to look up this bindi thing. How do you spell it?
Bindi.
Okay.
Men usually don't even wear them. They usually use paint. But it's just a symbol of, the third eye.
Yeah,
right.
So tell me now, how old are your two older sons?
37 and 33.
When I left Christianity, I was a pastor, youth pastor, and there's thousands of people that I led to the Lord. And then when I left, a lot of the things that people ask me very commonly is, how the hell did your kids turn out? Because I took them on this journey with me. They were young, or at least they were raised in Christian school. They were raised as preachers' kids. And then their dad goes a different direction, and how did they turn out? And so my question, what I think maybe the listener might be asking, is how did your boys turn out?
Well, that's a really good question. My older son, who's 37, who I'll call the mogul, owns about 1,000 properties. He owns a big printing company. He owns a company that designs and builds trade show booths. And he drives a Tesla.
How about that, huh?
And he's beautiful and well-adjusted, and all of his partners love him, and he is immensely successful.
Yeah, financially.
And emotionally.
Okay, there you go.
He's a rock. He's the calm one in the middle of the storm, and no one knows how he does it. It's just shocking.
Yeah, he's got a lot of irons in the fire.
He had to file 14 tax returns last year. He's shockingly amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And he didn't graduate from high school.
Oh my!
Wow.
So that's how one of them turned out. The second one is a musician and an actor, and he left home when he was 17, and he played buckets in the subways in New York. You can look him up on YouTube.
What's his name?
Ryan Donahue. It's Donowho. He got picked up and was in his first movie by the time he was 18.
Wow.
It doesn't hurt that he's pretty. And then he was on the OC for a while. He's been in 30 movies. He's made a living being an actor and a musician for 12 years now. Actually, more like 15, I guess.
He kind of has a Johnny Depp look. I'm looking at him here.
Yeah, he's pretty. He's got a little apartment in the Hollywood Hills, and he's still eating off of his art. So
yeah,
I would say that's successful.
Boy, I'll say. Yeah, excellent.
And then I have a 14-year-old who's a debate scholar. So his mother is a CPA, and I've been married for 15 years to her. And he's had a much more stable, straight existence. Yeah. But he's still, he's a self-proclaimed atheist. His mom is a Catholic, or what she calls herself a Catholo-Buddhist, a very liberal Catholic.
Sure.
Obviously, to be married to me. My kids are just kind of way, way better than me, and so it's worked out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Great.
So what happens when we die, Wayne?
I kind of take the Buddha's position, which is no one knows.
Right.
But and his position also is that you shouldn't spend a lot of time speculating on it because it's impossible to know.
Right.
I tend towards the eternal spirit. I kind of tend towards that there is kind of an essence that moves on into another entity. But I've decided to not deal too heavily with things that are impossible to know.
Right. Mm-hmm. So what do you do with your time? What do you do with your life and your day?
My mogul son puts me in the caboose in real estate deals, and my wife is, a highly paid CPA for oil companies.
Yeah.
I get to kind of cruise along and do whatever the heck I want to do.
Nice.
Now, what I'm wanting to do right now is invest. And what I am doing is investing in the medical marijuana business in California.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going back and forth between here and California all the time trying to get that off the ground. That's my current thing. I've spent most of my life hiding out and reading when I was supposed to be doing something else. From the time I was in elementary school, and I would put fake book covers on my books, whatever I was reading, and read them in class and get in trouble. And this is the entire story of my life, is reading when I was supposed to be doing something else and getting in trouble for it.
Yeah. Right.
Well, Wayne, I'm intrigued by irony. And I'm looking at your life, and it's funny because I know, mostly my relationship with you is framed on Facebook. And so
Right.
A lot of what you post is liberal. A lot of what you post is anti-capitalistic or anti-oil, and yet I'm hearing that in your life, your wife works for an oil company, your son is very much benefiting from the capitalistic system. Talk about the ironies in your life and how you navigate those.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not anti-capitalist.
Okay.
Because I believe capitalism, in essence, is one person buying something freely from some other person selling something
It's about
freely.
freedoms, which I think you could obviously buy into. Yeah.
So
Sure.
I would be closer to an anarcho-capitalist if I was going to be an anarchist, which I'm not. But I believe in the role of government. But I hate the militaristic society that we've created. I hate the binary society that we've created. I believe that the government has been co-opted by corporations. I believe all of that.
Yeah.
But that does not make me anti-capitalist. It makes me anti-corporatist. And I believe that it's the role of government to defend the commons from the corporations.
Right.
And I'm just the opposite. It defends the corporations from the commons.
Right.
Yeah.
There's two ways to combat binary, and one is instead of it being binary, instead of being black and white, you can say it's both. And we do find truth in both extremes. And then the other way is it's neither, which is probably more of the Tao way,
Yeah.
But here again, I think we're constantly wrestling with irony. We're wrestling with polar opposites. Yeah. And somewhere the truth is in the middle.
Yeah, I'm not wrestling with any of that shit.
Okay, there's the Zen. Yeah.
I'm not wrestling.
We want some of that.
I think that experience in '97. I stopped wrestling. I don't even care about the contradictions in my life.
Okay.
That's great.
So these are not issues for me intellectually or spiritually. I kind of achieved such a fundamental peace on all of these issues all at once that I just don't wrestle. And I don't contend really, about it. At that point, and really leading up to that point, I felt like that I had discovered the kind of the interior secrets of the universe. What happens is when I get away, when I have issues and when I get out of the kind of what I would say out of the Tao, I have a place to go back to. I kind of have a place that I know exists, and I know what to do to get back there.
So what do you do?
I study the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. I study the Tao, and I throw the I-Ching.
What do you mean by throw the I-Ching? I don't know what that means.
Okay, you've never used the I-Ching?
Nope.
No.
Okay, well, My number one recommendation to you and anybody listening is that they obtain a copy of the I-Ching and see if it's relevant to their lives.
So how do you even spell that?
It's I-Ching, C-H-I-N-G. Mm-hmm. And it's a Taoist adjunct to the Tao Te Ching, a very enigmatic book of divination.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether have you seen the symbols on the Korean flag? You know, there's mm-hmm. symbols around the edge of the
mm-hmm.
yin yang that mm-hmm. are solid and broken lines.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They call those trigrams.
Okay.
And the Tao is made up of 64 hexagrams, which is a symbol of 6 broken and solid lines.
Okay.
Right. Mm-hmm.
There are 64 possible combinations of 6 solid and broken lines. And the way the I-Ching works is that you use a set of coins, or I have a set of marbles, Anyway, you use something to build a hexagram of those lines, and then you look it up in a legend and you look up in the book, and rather than tell you the future, it tells you your present situation and how to react to it in a Taoist manner.
Okay, so throwing the I-Ching is a bit of like rolling the dice, and then the dice tell you what to read.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly.
Wow.
But it's not dice. And
I'm just using that because that's my reference, I guess. Yeah.
You can do it with 3 coins. I use a set of marbles that I put together. I'm ridiculously skeptical of anything.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe in the I-Ching, but it's unbelievably effective for me.
It works whether you believe it or not.
Exactly.
How about that? There's that irony you're talking about. Yeah, go ahead.
I've stopped trying to explain it or understand it at all.
Cool.
I just said, it
sounds pragmatic, yeah?
Well, it's everything about the Tao is practical. Okay. There's not a bunch of, as I say, there's no overhanging doctrine or things to join or any of that stuff. So it's either practical or it's useless. And so for me, it's crazy practical, and it's influenced. I mean, to me, it made me the person that could get a woman like I have right now. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I was in my old state, I wouldn't have been good enough for her, and I'm still not good enough for her. But I have this aspect of myself that makes me almost acceptable to her. And,
that's great.
So when you start to leave the Tao and you start to become a wrestler, like I was describing, you start to lose that piece. You throw the I-Ching and you get back to your center or whatever, and is that close? It just works.
I then know how to act, kind of. Because all of its advice is always gonna be Taoist.
So I'm curious about these marbles. How do you read marbles?
Okay, well, the original way to look up the Tao here, and I have a copy right here so I can show. I was just in Mendocino, California.
Right.
I was discussing a pretty serious business proposition with a woman up there who's a major figure up there. What I'm doing right now is gathering all the team. I'm putting together the people to do what I'm trying to do up there.
Okay.
And so I got up there last Friday, and the first thing I did when I got in my room was I threw the Ching. And what that means is I've set up a set of marbles that are mathematically correspond to what would happen if I was throwing, and you don't know what I'm talking about, but if the original way to do this, you used 49 sticks.
Oh, boy.
And you sorted them into piles, and it's just a very long process. It took you like 20 minutes to get one hexagram. And some physicist or mathematician figured out the algorithm of how they worked and developed a way to where you could make a set of marbles of 4 colors with different numbers in each color. Like there's 7 black ones and 5 white ones and 3 yellow ones and a red one. Okay. So there's 17 marbles in the bag, and you pick them out, and they correspond to a broken or a solid line, or a broken and a solid line that's moving. Which I know I'm talking nonsense.
No, we're tracking.
Yeah.
I did that last Friday concerning my trip, which was a fact gathering, relationship building trip. I got number 45, which is called clustering. All right?
Mm-hmm.
And the key words are gather, assemble, bunch together, collect, crowds. A great effort brings a great reward. And it says clustering describes your situation in terms of collecting and gathering. Its symbol is a great collective effort, like building dams, a great house, or a great harvest. The way to deal with it is to unite people and things through a common feeling or goal. Concentrate the crowd and turn it into an organized whole. This is the time for great projects. And this is a multi-$100,000 project I'm talking about here. It says, be like the king who imagines a temple full of images that unite people and connect them with greater forces. See great people. Visit those who can help and advise you. Look at your own central idea and how you organize your thoughts. Reach out and touch others. And, there's other ones that say, stay in your room. I mean,
wow.
So this was very apropos.
Now,
but it also gave me a moving line, which, I can explain to you later if you're really interested in this stuff, which you ought to be.
Yeah. Well, now, Wayne, you're also reading from something. Is this the I-Ching you're reading from, or is it the Tao?
I'm reading.
It's number 45.
I'm reading from the I-Ching, yes.
Okay.
But I also got a moving number, which is, as I say, it's a much larger explanation. But in any event, and what it said was, as soon as you begin, and this is specifically concerning this one woman, all right. As soon as you begin, a flood of painful memories swamps you. There is really nothing you can do here. Leave gently and quietly. It is not a mistake. If you simply try to adapt to this situation, you will be covered in distress and confusion.
Wow.
And this gave me a really clear notion going into this meeting with this lady that it might not work out, and to be on the lookout for that. And within an hour, I knew that I could not partner with her, and that I needed to be as nice and easy as possible to get out of it. And I called her 2 days after I got back and told her, and I think we're still going to be friends. But this put that note of caution in my head. And whereas before I probably would have kept her on the string a little bit and kind of, well, maybe we'll see what happens. I would have taken that attitude. I knew in this situation that I just needed to be cleaner than that and be, and say, this is not going to happen like we talked about. I have another idea, And
But did you see anything? Did anything come up with her that closely resembled the way the book described?
Absolutely,
like the old the memories thing. Like
yes, absolutely.
Like what?
She reacted to a couple of things that I said in a way that I was just like, I've been here before, and it was just clear. I've used this for the last 20 years faithfully. And sometimes I go for a whole year and don't use it at all. If you're not confused and you don't have a real problem and you aren't trying,
you don't need it.
You don't need it. You don't have to do it. But in the last year, I've probably used it 15 times.
Yeah.
Because I've been navigating areas that I'm unfamiliar with and I'm very nervous about. And I want to really feel good about exactly where I am and exactly what I'm doing.
You guard your peace. You guard your chi, or the zen.
Whatever.
And
Whatever.
So to me, the pillars of my spiritual thinking, and again, I have a giant Ganesh in my. I love Buddha. I love Ganesh. I've got Ganesh stories that are just the coolest ever. So to me, I don't reject, and I love Jesus.
Right.
I really, I will never reject the work that Jesus did in my heart.
Right.
And I will never reject the people that Jesus brought into my life. You know, so I'm not anti-Christian or anti-Jesus. I am anti-dogma of all types,
Right.
and do not believe that that the Bible is the infallible Word of God or any of that stuff.
Right. Sure.
To me, my path was Jesus, Rumi, who's a Sufi,
Yeah.
Ganesh, who's Hindu, and the Tao. And that's those were very distinct periods of study for me.
Mm-hmm.
Is Ganesh a person? I don't have any history with it.
Is it the elephant? Which is the?
It's the elephant.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Ganesh.
okay.
Yes, the
Ganesh.
Indian. Go ahead.
Okay, the cool thing about Ganesh, for one thing, he just parties. Ganesh,
Well, there you go. Right there.
I mean, Ganesh, for a certain period of my life, there couldn't have been anybody better than Ganesh.
Yeah.
And Ganesh, when you study the attributes of Ganesh, he just makes you laugh. I had this little series of a little page that had a bunch of attributes of Ganesh. One of them was he wanders among the women practicing yoga with his virility. Well, I was going to yoga 3 days a week with all these rich housewives. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And
be careful.
and
So he sounds like Dionysius.
Yeah, a little bit.
in
Bacchus.
certain ways, but
Yeah.
but very, it's also the whole thing about Ganesh, is he's a boon giver. He gives you treats and removes obstacles, and to me Ganesh is just a blast.
Mm-hmm.
He's invaded my dreams. Ganesh is like my party buddy.
Wingman.
He's just but he's just the coolest thing. Once you get into Ganesh, you're just like, dude, and Ganesh is by far the most popular Hindu deity.
Well, yeah.
No matter what kind of, and you put him at the door, okay? And no matter what kind of temple you go to, there's a Ganesh in there,
Okay.
So pull out one of these Ganesh stories for us. You got me curious with you. You got a lot of good Ganesh stories. Throw us one.
Okay. Well, when I was seriously studying Ganesh, and I guess this would be, Ryan is about to turn 34, so it would have been, 19 years ago.
Okay.
And I was just steeping myself in Ganesh and all the Hindu deities, but particularly him. And I went to New York to visit my son Ryan, who was living in a very primitive situation. You had to climb a rope ladder into a little slot where he was sleeping. I spent the night with 3 different women while I was there at their apartments. At the first woman's house, I hung out, and her roommate comes out of his bedroom, and he has on a Ganesh exactly like the one I have on my neck. And we start talking about Ganesh, and he goes in his room and pulls out this big Ganesh, and he's like, my parents were meditators, I love Ganesh. And we have this little, Ganesh love fest at breakfast. And so then I go to the next house, and we start talking about Ganesh in the middle of the night, and she goes and pulls out a picture, of a big Ganesh that she has, and we talk about that. And then I get back to my son's apartment, and one of his roommates, a woman, came out and started talking to me. And I said, I went to the Asia Society today and saw this amazing Ganesh. And she went in her room and brought out a picture of her standing beside that Ganesh. And she was like, this one? And I was like, oh, yeah. So anyway, I had everything was about Ganesh on that trip. And so then I go up, and he has a fabric Ganesh on his ceiling, which is about, 3 feet from your face in the little slot where he sleeps. So I go to sleep with this giant Ganesh above me, and I have this dream, and I'm in a cab, and Ganesh is the driver. And Ganesh turns around and leans over the seat, and he goes, and he talks in a Brooklyn accent, which I cannot do. But he's like, hey, you see what's going on here? You see what's going on? So work with me, all right? Just work with me. And I was like, okay.
That's great.
And so, he invaded my dreams, and I've worked with him ever since. I have a Ganesh on my neck right now. And
tattoo?
And, to me, he's just the bomb. If you're going to have a deity, get one like Ganesh.
So, Wayne, what would you say to somebody who said that Ganesh and all those light rope creatures in your dream were demons?
Well, of course, I've already had that conversation.
Sure.
What can you say?
Exactly, right? There's nothing to say.
I mean, to me,
I disagree.
All of these things have opened up my heart and life in a way that is just beyond measure. I've seen zero negative effects from my relationship with these matters. There's no logical answer to them saying that they're demons, and there's no logical answer to me saying they're not.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, we're just in a realm. We're in a realm where there is no debate.
Right. And so, to me, I went with it. Mm-hmm. I could have said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and I'm sure they would have gone away, But because, I would have rejected them, But I went with it. To me, all of this stuff has given me the life I have, which is a life of amazing harmony and abundance in my family and out, So
yeah.
I can't argue with the result, and so I'm certainly not going to argue with the method.
So take me to, I've seen a couple of pictures where all three of your boys are under one roof, and it probably doesn't happen very often now. They're all over the country. Just describe for me Thanksgiving or something to where everybody's home, and what are you feeling?
Well, when we shut down what we call the Bindi Palace, which was this big house that I was renting and where we had parties and all that, and my boys went their ways. The 17-year-old went to New York, and the 19-year-old moved in with his girlfriend, and I moved in with a couple of boxes into a tiny little apartment with a woman who traveled all the time. I became good friends with a woman who had cancer, and I lived in her guest house. Mm-hmm. And she has thrown us Christmas dinner ever since, and everybody comes home for Christmas at her house. We don't, there's nothing religious about it. We just have great meal. We're very low key, there's not a lot of big anything, going on.
It's a low pressure situation.
Totally. There's always a couple of strays that didn't have someplace to go. My wife is from New Mexico, and we usually go to New Mexico for Thanksgiving, with her family. They're kind of new agey. There's not a religious overtone to anything that we do as a family, really.
Right.
We did walk a labyrinth about a month ago in Los Angeles. My 14-year-old is a self-proclaimed atheist, and the two other ones don't even bother to call themselves anything, So
just a non-issue.
It's just a complete non-issue,
Yeah.
I mean, as you can tell, I can talk about this stuff forever, So.
Well, and I appreciate it because it's completely a new world for me. How often do you have a meditation discipline that you practice?
I'm a terrible meditator. I can get to a kind of a meditative state, in a minute, And so my meditation is usually, a minute or two long. It's almost impossible for me to sit. I was doing Buddhist stuff for a while, and I just go crazy. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not a good meditator.
Well, when you say it only takes a minute or so, do you read or do you just...
I just breathe into it and visualize. And are you familiar with Osho?
No.
Mm-mm. Well, if you're interested in a survey of all the meditative stuff, including the Tao, a lot of great spiritual poets, Osho, he was formerly called the Rajneesh something. He was that guy years ago that had all those Rolls Royces and started a whole compound in Oregon, started a city there, and then got kicked out because the people of Oregon rose up against him because they were so crazy. Anyway, his expositions of these ideas and matters, to me, are the best there is. Okay. And he spoke them all. He's got like 200 books. He's dead now. He died in 1989. Osho, to me, for anyone interested in any of these matters, you can find a book by Osho on almost anything I've talked about. And to me, he's the ultimate expositor. Mm-hmm. Whatever you think of him, and I don't think he was especially great as a human, but boy, his teaching and his comprehension of it was just amazing. And he had hundreds of thousands of followers. You look into Osho, you'll find him very interesting, I think.
Cool. Yeah. What's one of the most embarrassing memories in your life?
I don't know.
Ganesh was involved, I have a feeling.
It's NSFW.
Oh, okay.
I can tell you that it involved me trying to climb over the top of a door naked to get back inside where I'd locked my keys. when you have to call the security guard in the high rise to come up and you're naked, that was embarrassing. I don't know. I have a ridiculously high embarrassment threshold, so I don't get embarrassed.
Shameless.
That's right.
I've done so much crazy shit and been caught at it that it's like I've become callous to embarrassment.
Immune. Exactly.
So here's another one. Do you have any pet peeves?
I think my pet peeve theologically would be that there's only one way to heaven.
Yeah.
Right. Is there anything strange or weird about your body that is unique?
I'm kind of hunchbacked, so I guess that. I refer to myself as that weird little hunchback man.
So how tall are you?
It's according to whether I've just done yoga or not, but I'm probably like, 5'6". I'm short. Mm-hmm. My yoga teacher says that I'm one of her favorite students because no one looks more different from when they come in to when they go out.
Oh my gosh. That's
stretches you a little bit? Yeah, I guess so.
Well, I know what to do, and if I think about it, I can straighten myself out, but normally, I'm just turning into a question mark unless I get conscious enough to really correct myself.
Yeah, I get it.
Well, Wayne, I appreciate you talking with us. Your journey is fascinating.
It is,
and you've left me with a lot to think about because you seem to be a man that is happy, that is content, that is at peace with his world, and I think we're all on our quest for that.
Absolutely.
And is the irony that I'm going to end on is how you are a skeptic and yet you believe a lot of shit.
I'm not sure if you could put it that way. I practice a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And I engage with a lot of things, but I don't believe hardly anything.
Right. And it's almost like you're exploiting it almost. You're using it for what it works for you, but you can, you can keep the rest.
Oh, absolutely. No, I'm a cafeteria religionist.
There you go.
Some days I feel like Indian, some days I feel like Chinese. I see no conflict between moving among these things, and I'm moving among them at a level that is immensely satisfying. As I say, I wrestle not at all with anything religious.
Yeah.
I'm thoroughly engaged with religion, but as I say, I don't believe it. I'm not a believer. I'm a practitioner.
Yeah.
I believe in practices.
Right.
Now, have you guys seen my video?
No.
Well, here in January, I'm the star of a Mac Miller video. I don't know whether you know who Mac Miller is, but he's this huge white kid rapper. And those are all my clothes. Okay, so I've been doing this pseudo guru thing for 20 years now, and I just gather clothes as I go along, and I have all these ultra pimp clothes. If you really want to see like a culmination of my shtick and wardrobe, that's the thing to watch. And I had nothing to do with it. This woman was in a casting meeting in New York City, and they said, "We're going to Houston. We need somebody to play a guru." And she was like, "Just go to Wayne's house. He's already got all the swag. You don't have to, They came to my house. I started laying out my clothes, and they just were like, "You're the guy." And so, of course, I'm in a video with all these young hot chicks and me.
Yeah, I have seen that. That's right.
Wow. Awesome.
Had like 1 million views now.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Great. Excellent.
Great talk. Thanks a lot, man.
Absolutely,
Right.
Wayne.
Good talking to you guys.
Great talking to you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Wayne. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm thinking as I'm sitting here, what is the difference between throwing the Ching and looking at the 8-ball?
Yeah, or looking at the innards of a cow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
Well, I would say the difference from not to put words in his mouth, but what I hear him saying is it works for me.
Yes.
So he's on this trip. He's out in California from Houston. He's there to do this team building thing. He throws the marbles.
The I-Ching.
It tells him to read number 45 in the I-Ching, which is about clustering.
Right.
And I'll be damned. I mean, so I guess what he's saying is, I don't believe it, but it's working.
But it's working for me.
It's that horseshoe thing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, if there's something called the law or the rule of large numbers. a coincidence.
Odds.
Odds.
Yeah.
What are the odds? You would say.
Yeah.
Well, he's gathering people. There's a chance. I don't know what the chance would be that this thing would come up, but the point is, it works for him. It works for him, and so I guess there's nothing you could say about it.
What's the thing in the newspaper that you read for Pisces or Capricorn?
Like astrology.
Astrology.
Yeah.
And what are the odds of that? You could read every one of those, and they're going to apply to you in some way. Maybe.
It's like meaning making, pattern seeking, storytelling creatures.
Right.
We make things mean.
But here's the difference that I look at when I look at Wayne.
Yeah.
And as opposed to somebody credulous or gullible or self-delusional, I see him almost as a thief in the night.
Yeah.
Just taking from these things and saying, yeah, I'll take that, and it works for me. And I don't know. I don't see him as a naive fool.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it? Because he'll say, "Oh, I'm skeptical. Of course, I don't believe it, but it works." So, and it's hard for people to have that dichotomy. That.
Well, I get the impression that for him, that the moment it stops working, he's out. Like he's not a devotee.
Yeah.
That's where I think where he says, "Hey, I'm not devoted. I'm not religious. I'm certainly not dogmatic."
Yeah, and and he's a Taoist. And when you look at Tao, you say, "Oh, I get it. I get it." I mean, because people have a hard time with Tao because it's so Eastern, and because we think in such a Western way, a binary way.
Binary way.
Yeah.
Which brings me to, it is often criticized.
Yeah.
When this what he called religious cafeterianism.
Yeah, and that's you're right. That's a big criticism.
That's a huge criticism because people say, "Well, you just cherry pick the scriptures you like," as if that's a bad thing. And I've always said, of course I do, because I'm the steward of my own faith. I'm the steward of my journey. I'm the steward of my beliefs,
right?
And you damn right I'm going to be scrutinous. It's not even a word, but I'm going to pick and choose. Mm-hmm. What else would I be but just open wide and take it?
Yeah.
No, I'm going to pick. I protect what goes in and what comes out, et cetera, et cetera. So cafeteriaism is back on the rise, man. I mean, we need to lift it up as that's the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've ever met or talked to anybody who I feel like is a better master of cafeterianism than Wayne Donahue.
Yeah.
Donahue.
Yeah, Wayne is quite something. He really is. I just love it. And it really is that Tao thing because, it's like, well, if you got it, you don't got it. And if you think you got it, you don't got it.
I know.
So it's like, well, what is it? That's why it's so difficult for us. But it's very clear this is how he runs his life. He's a very Tao.
Yeah, the very thing that is a negative within binaryism is how elusive the truth is.
Right.
And so we pick a pole
and
we cling to it and we gather under a maypole or because we gotta find it.
Right.
Whereas Wayne and the Tao is saying, no, the mystery of it. In fact, I'm the opposite. I don't want to grab a pole. I don't want to land. Most often in theological discussions with people where I'll say, well, I just don't believe that, or I disagree, or I don't I think that's wrong. Most fundamentalists will say to you, on what basis? On what basis? Because they're so anti-relativism or whatever. They're like, on what basis do you think it's okay for you to have an abortion or whatever? And so they're like trying to get you, they think they're trying to get you to admit that you don't have a basis, that you're pulling it out of your ass. And that would be a bad thing. Whereas I'm saying, yeah, I may be pulling it out of my ass, but at least it's my ass and not Moses' ass. or somebody else telling me
Paul,
what to think. Because,
Augustine.
And I think at the end of the day, this thing that we need, or that we call a basis or a base, which is for them would be Holy Writ,
right,
is a myth, and we want the basis so bad that we'll make one up and call it that. And what I think Wayne and Taoism comes from is there is no basis. We are floating in space. I love the way that that nature. He talked about nature being being a student of nature,
right,
and. Well, ironically, there are scriptures that talk about nature, especially the Psalms. David or whatever would say, I see God and nature, and I'm, the mountains testify of your glory, or whatever, and looking at nature and learning from it,
Right.
and I've always said this, that we're floating in space, and that there is no basis. In fact, a couple of weeks ago when we had Patsy on, she was saying, well, the Earth's rotating counterclockwise, and I said, well, depends on which side of the cosmos or where it's at in its orbit. There is no basis to say that it's rotating counterclockwise.
Right.
It doesn't exist, and you can, for you to come to a place where to say it's rotating counterclockwise, well, that's just from one place in time.
Mm-hmm. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
How wonderfully absurd everything is, huh?
Yeah.
Very
And if we
strange.
can get comfortable with the absurdity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
I guess we're done, huh? You want to do any
Good
opening?
talk. See you out there.
Yeah. Good talk.